Logan Hayes was 38 years old, a software architect living in the heart of San Francisco, with a routine that was as precise as the code he wrote. Every morning, he brewed his coffee in the marble kitchen of his downtown apartment, the rich aroma blending with the faint scent of leather from his worn messenger bag. He reviewed emails on his laptop while the soft hum of the city below mixed with the distant clang of the cable cars, the early sunlight glinting off the stainless steel appliances and casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. His life had been quiet, orderly, predictable: work, gym, dinners with friends, and weekend visits to his rooftop garden where the roses bloomed in perfect symmetry. Then, that Friday afternoon, a courier arrived with an envelope that made him pause mid-step. Something felt wrong. The handwriting was familiar yet formal, and the wax seal carried the emblem of someone he thought he trusted. He opened it carefully, his eyes scanning the words, and then he saw it, an invitation to Olivia Morgan's engagement party, accompanied by a note dripping with condescension and a subtle, calculated humiliation. His breath caught, heart steady yet hammering with an electric tension. He had no idea what was coming. For a moment, he closed his eyes, absorbing the shock, then opened them again, cataloging every detail: the envelope's texture, the precise folds, the faint perfume lingering from the stationery, the promise of an audience that would be waiting to witness him as he had been underestimated. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I want you to imagine walking into a room where everyone believes you have nothing to offer, only to reveal a truth they could never anticipate. Logan sat back in his ergonomic chair, analyzing the tone, the phrasing, noting every possible layer of intent and insult. His mind catalogued the timeline, the subtle cues of Olivia's social posts, the hints dropped to mutual friends, everything meticulously. The black SUV waiting downstairs, polished and gleaming under the afternoon sun, caught his peripheral vision as he sipped the remaining coffee, a silent witness to the impending confrontation. Outside, the city moved with the usual rhythm: honking cars, distant construction, the occasional pedestrian pausing to check their phone. Inside, the scent of the marble kitchen mixed with espresso and faint vanilla from a candle, while the glinting silverware reflected the light like miniature spotlights on a stage. Logan's hands rested calmly on the edge of the desk, yet every neuron was alert, absorbing, cataloging, predicting. Something was shifting. The invitation was more than a piece of paper, it was a challenge, a trap, and a revelation all at once. He checked his watch, noting the seconds as they ticked by with a quiet insistence, each one amplifying the suspense. His eyes moved around the apartment, noting the subtle cues of luxury hidden in plain sight: the polished oak of the floors, the faint sparkle of a crystal wine glass from the last dinner party, the heavy silk drapes that muted the sounds of the city, the small stack of financial documents that told a story of quiet mastery. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes leaned back, closed his eyes briefly, and let the details settle, a serene calm masking the rapid calculations of strategy, timing, and eventual revelation. Then he stood, letting the cool floor beneath his feet anchor him, knowing that every observation he had made would serve him in the moments to come. Something felt imminent. Something had shifted. Logan was ready. The next morning, Logan Hayes woke to the soft hum of the city beneath his apartment, sunlight spilling across the polished hardwood floors and catching on the edges of the marble countertops. He moved methodically, pouring coffee into his favorite ceramic mug, the warmth seeping into his hands as he scanned the room, noting every subtle shadow cast by the blinds. Outside, a black SUV sat silently at the curb, its surface reflecting the morning light like a dark mirror, a silent participant in the orchestration of what was to come. Logan observed the apartment with meticulous attention, the faint scent of vanilla from the candle that had burned overnight, the polished silver handles of the cabinets, the small stack of unopened mail on the console. Something felt off, yet he did not panic. He had trained himself to read the signs, to absorb each detail, catalog every nuance without reacting impulsively. He checked his watch, noting the precise minute as a subtle rhythm anchoring his thoughts. His laptop sat on the kitchen island, open to the financial reports he had been reviewing, the crisp numbers and clean spreadsheets providing a sense of control in a morning that promised disruption. Then he moved to the window, lifting the blinds slightly to watch the street below. Pedestrians passed in orderly waves, the occasional cyclist gliding past the corner cafe, the distant sound of a streetcar bell punctuating the morning air. Each movement, each sound was observed and stored, forming a mental map of the environment. Logan's gaze returned to the black SUV, noting the faint reflection of sunlight off the tinted windows, the angle of the tires, the subtle way it had been parked. He set down his mug, fingers lingering on the cool marble as he considered the implications, the timing, and the calculated steps he would take. Every detail mattered: the perfume he had noticed lingering in the apartment the day before, the soft rustle of the silk curtains as they moved with the morning breeze, the distant hum of air conditioning from the neighboring penthouse. He noted how the light hit the wine glass left on the counter from last night's dinner, the reflection of the crystal catching the sunlight in a way that almost resembled a spotlight. Something about the scene seemed ordinary yet charged, mundane yet deliberate, and Logan catalogued every visual and sensory cue with precise attention, forming a strategy in real time. He adjusted his posture, sitting back and observing the layout of the kitchen and living area, the placement of each object seemingly insignificant but holding potential information about the patterns of the household. The quiet ticking of a wall clock marked time steadily, and Logan allowed himself a moment to breathe, to absorb the calm before the storm. Then, as he reached for his phone, a notification appeared, subtle and unassuming, yet carrying a weight he could feel in his chest. Something had shifted. He tapped the screen lightly, and his eyes scanned the message, processing the words without immediate reaction, cataloging the sender, the time, the tone, every hint of intention embedded within. His mind worked in layers, evaluating what was known, what remained hidden, and how each piece fit into the larger pattern of events he anticipated. The city noises outside continued in their usual cadence, but within the apartment, Logan moved with a heightened awareness, noting each subtle movement of light, each change in shadow, each minute alteration in the ambient sounds. Something was about to unfold, and he was prepared, yet the full scope of it remained unseen. He stood and walked slowly through the kitchen toward the living room, eyes scanning the surfaces, the reflections, the furniture arrangement. Each detail became part of a mental dossier, every sensory input catalogued as if preparing for an examination that would require total recall. The coffee aroma lingered, mingling with the faint trace of perfume still clinging to the room, and Logan inhaled deeply, letting the air anchor his senses, sharpen his focus. Something felt wrong. Then he noticed a small envelope lying on the edge of the marble counter, its presence subtle yet commanding attention. He had no idea what was coming. Logan Hayes reached for it carefully, his hand steady, eyes narrowing as he observed every crease and subtle mark on the envelope. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes sat at the edge of his living room sofa, the envelope in his hand, a weight both literal and metaphorical. He observed the space around him, noting the sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and how it reflected off the polished marble surfaces, casting long, geometric shadows across the sleek hardwood floors. The soft hum of the city below reached him faintly, interspersed with the distant murmur of a passing cable car and the occasional honk of a car horn. He opened the envelope slowly, the paper crisp under his fingertips, and found a letter that hinted at a gathering designed to showcase his absence rather than his presence. Something felt wrong. His eyes scanned the words again, noting the subtle condescension, the careful phrasing meant to provoke a reaction. He did not react outwardly, instead, he catalogued each line mentally, each phrase becoming a data point in his growing map of intent and expectation. Logan's mind turned inward, analyzing patterns and anticipating outcomes, while his body remained calm, the smooth leather of the sofa beneath him grounding his senses. He rose and moved to the kitchen, observing the polished chrome fixtures, the glinting utensils arranged meticulously on the countertop, the faint lingering aroma of roasted coffee beans mixing with the subtle scent of vanilla from the candle he had left burning overnight. Every sensory detail registered, the subtle play of light across the marble backsplash, the reflection of the crystal wine glass sitting by the sink, the quiet ticking of the wall clock marking time with unyielding precision. Logan traced the path from the kitchen to the front door, noticing the black SUV parked below, its glossy surface catching the morning light, its presence a quiet testament to preparedness. He moved back to the living area and sat, his gaze following the sunlight shifting across the room, observing how the shadows stretched and contracted over the furniture, the polished surfaces of the side tables catching glints that seemed almost purposeful. He allowed himself a deep, controlled breath, absorbing the normalcy of the environment while acknowledging the subtle undercurrent of tension the letter had introduced. Something was building, something unspoken but palpable. Logan reviewed the calendar on his tablet, cross-referencing the timing of the gathering with other details he had observed in recent weeks, noting patterns in communication, subtle indications in social media posts, and hints from mutual acquaintances. He methodically began creating a mental timeline, each entry meticulously indexed and connected to potential outcomes. The faint scent of leather from his messenger bag and the subtle whiff of polished wood from the furniture combined to create an atmosphere of both comfort and anticipation. He adjusted the blinds slightly, watching the light shift, noting the angle, the intensity, the subtle warmth it cast across the polished surfaces. Something felt imminently poised to change. Logan allowed himself a moment of reflection, cataloging everything he had seen, smelled, heard, and felt, organizing the information into actionable insights without a single outward display of concern. The distant sounds of the city remained steady, yet within his apartment, every detail was heightened, amplified by his acute awareness. He glanced again at the envelope, its presence a constant reminder of the pending confrontation, and he began to strategize, plotting possible courses of action while maintaining an exterior calm. Something felt wrong. Then he noticed the small smudge of ink on the edge of the envelope, barely perceptible, a minor detail yet potentially significant. He recorded it mentally, adding it to the growing dossier he was compiling silently in his mind. The marble countertop, the hardwood floors, the gleam of the crystal wine glass, the subtle aroma of vanilla and coffee, the quiet tick of the wall clock, the glint of the black SUV in the morning light, all of it coalesced into a cinematic tableau of observation and anticipation. Then he looked out the window, across the city streets glimmering with morning light, and thought, everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes set the envelope carefully on the marble countertop and moved toward the living room, his movements deliberate, controlled, as though each step was part of a calculation he had been performing all morning. He glanced out the floor-to-ceiling windows, noting the soft reflections of sunlight on the glass panes and the faint shimmer of the city streets below, the distant sound of a streetcar bell punctuating the quiet rhythm of the morning. Something felt wrong. He settled into his favorite leather armchair, the smooth, dark surface conforming to his posture, and began to review the details of the envelope and the note within, mentally cataloging the tone, the choice of words, and the subtle cues of intent. His eyes wandered over the apartment, absorbing the glint of the crystal wine glasses lined neatly on the sideboard, the polished chrome handles on the cabinets, and the faint aroma of freshly ground coffee mingling with vanilla from the candle that had burned overnight. Logan's mind worked through multiple scenarios, each one branching logically from the next, considering the sequence of events that could unfold when he attended the gathering. The black SUV parked below remained in his peripheral vision, a quiet reminder of readiness, the sunlight reflecting off its surface, glinting like a subtle alert. He traced the soft lines of the hardwood floors, noting the reflections of light and shadow, the subtle imperfections in the wood grain that gave the apartment character and warmth. Logan allowed himself a moment to breathe, the scent of leather from his messenger bag mingling with the faint hints of wood polish and marble, grounding his senses as he prepared for the anticipation that had settled into his chest. Something was building. He picked up his tablet and began reviewing social updates, calendar notes, and communications that hinted at the underlying intentions of the event, each detail carefully noted and cross-referenced with prior knowledge of routines and patterns. The sunlight shifted, the shadows stretching across the room in elongated forms, highlighting the contrast between calm interiors and the brewing tension of the impending situation. A soft clink of a wine glass caught his attention, the light refracting through the crystal and catching the marble surface like a small spotlight, drawing his focus and serving as a reminder of the duality of luxury and anticipation. Logan's gaze returned to the envelope, turning it slightly in his hands, the weight and texture a reminder of the meticulous planning behind the words it contained. He catalogued every crease, every faint smudge, every subtle irregularity as if each were a clue. Then he moved to the window again, letting the city noises filter through, the low hum of cars, distant conversations, the rhythmic tapping of heels on pavement, each sound catalogued as data in his mind, contributing to an ever-expanding mental map of observation. He adjusted the blinds slightly, watching the movement of sunlight across the room, noting the play of light on the surfaces, the way reflections shifted with the angle, the subtle glow off polished metal and glass. Something felt imminent. He allowed his senses to drink in every detail, the warmth of the sunlight, the coolness of the marble beneath his fingertips, the faint scent of coffee and vanilla, the quiet mechanical hum of the apartment's ventilation system. Then he looked again at the envelope, the subtle elegance of the paper and the deliberate phrasing of the note within striking him with a quiet intensity. He had no idea what was coming. Logan Hayes leaned back in his armchair, observing everything simultaneously, noting, absorbing, calculating, his mind a precise instrument cataloging every sensory input, every nuance, every potential clue. The morning air carried a faint breeze, stirring the silk curtains slightly, adding movement to the otherwise still scene. The distant hum of the city continued, the reflections on glass and metal creating a cinematic tableau of anticipation. Something felt wrong. Then, as he tapped the edge of the envelope lightly, his eyes narrowed, noting a faint indentation on the surface, subtle yet potentially significant, and he added it to the growing mental dossier he was silently constructing. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes stood and stretched, letting his senses calibrate to the morning light filtering through the large windows, the warmth of the sun casting elongated reflections across the marble countertops and polished hardwood floors. He moved deliberately toward the office corner, the soft click of his shoes against the floorboards punctuating the quiet apartment. He opened his laptop and reviewed his schedule, noting the precise timing of events and mentally layering the potential outcomes of the engagement gathering. His eyes flicked to the black SUV parked below, its surface glinting in the sun, a silent sentinel waiting for the orchestrated sequence to unfold. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, the air carrying a subtle hint of vanilla and the residual fragrance of a designer candle he had left burning overnight. Logan sipped his coffee slowly, the warmth grounding him, while his mind catalogued each detail, the angle of sunlight on the countertops, the reflective surfaces of crystal wine glasses, the soft hum of air conditioning, the distant street sounds merging into a low urban symphony. He noted the smallest details, the way the light caught the edges of his silver laptop, the faint gleam on the chrome handles of cabinets, the subtle arrangement of personal effects on the sideboard. Then he reviewed the note again, parsing the subtext, the carefully chosen words designed to provoke, to unsettle, to suggest humiliation while leaving room for interpretation. He catalogued the intentions without allowing emotion to dictate his response, every line a data point in a meticulous mental map. Something felt imminent. Logan leaned back slightly, his hand brushing the smooth leather of the chair, feeling the coolness beneath his fingertips, and allowed himself a moment to anticipate reactions, observing patterns in Olivia Morgan's previous social cues, the hints in her social posts, the subtle signals she had sent to friends about the upcoming event. He imagined the layout of the party, the placement of guests, the glint of glassware, the subtle sparkle of polished silver trays, the soft lighting that would accentuate the luxury of the room and the expected grandeur of the event. Logan noted the interplay between ordinary domesticity and opulent surroundings, cataloging each element, the polished marble, the crisp linens, the faint fragrance of wine lingering in the air, the subtle reflections off glass surfaces. He checked the time, noting each passing minute as a small drumbeat contributing to the buildup of anticipation, every second reinforcing the importance of precision and awareness. Then he reviewed his personal preparations, clothing, accessories, and subtle luxury cues he would use to communicate confidence without overt declaration, each choice deliberate and intentional. The soft rustle of curtains in the morning breeze, the warmth of the sunlight on his skin, the low hum of the city, the reflective surfaces of marble and glass, the subtle scent of coffee and vanilla, all coalesced into a cinematic tableau of observation and preparation. Something felt wrong. He allowed himself a deep breath, centering attention on the sensory details, the quiet cadence of the apartment, the precise arrangement of objects, the shifting light across surfaces. Each element became a reference point, a datum for the unfolding scenario, a layer in the complex anticipation of what was to come. Logan moved to the window again, peering down at the streets below, observing the flow of morning traffic, the pedestrians passing with rhythmic precision, the distant sound of a streetcar bell punctuating the low urban symphony. The black SUV glimmered beneath the morning light, its presence a reminder of readiness, of potential action, of the coming convergence of circumstance. Logan Hayes cataloged each element, internalizing, analyzing, preparing, the apartment a controlled environment, sensory inputs heightened, observations precise. Then he set his coffee down and focused on the note once more, considering every subtle nuance, every possible implication, every hidden intention embedded in the language. He had no idea what was coming. Something felt imminent. The soft clink of the crystal wine glass on the sideboard, the glint of polished chrome, the angled sunlight on the marble, the faint vanilla scent mingling with coffee, all coalesced into a layered tableau of suspense. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes moved deliberately through his apartment, each motion measured, each breath controlled, as he transitioned from the living room to the kitchen area, his eyes scanning the polished marble countertops and the gleaming stainless steel appliances. The morning sunlight fell at an angle that highlighted the subtle textures of the hardwood floors, the soft sheen on the leather of his chair, and the delicate reflections from the crystal wine glasses on the sideboard. He reached for his tablet and began reviewing financial summaries, guest lists, and subtle social updates, mapping connections and noting inconsistencies that might reveal underlying intentions. Each notification, each timestamp, each phrasing in messages and emails became a data point, meticulously catalogued in his mind. The black SUV remained in view from the window, its presence a quiet reminder of the external readiness that matched his internal preparation. He noted the angle of the tires, the slight reflection of sunlight on the tinted windows, the faint sound of the city below carrying upward through the partially open window. Something felt wrong. Logan walked toward the office corner, the smooth hardwood floors creaking subtly underfoot, observing the way sunlight bounced off the polished surfaces and into the room, glinting off the edge of his laptop and the crystal paperweight holding down his documents. The faint aroma of coffee mingled with vanilla from the candle, creating a sensory anchor, while the soft hum of the city blended with the low mechanical buzz of the apartment's ventilation. Logan paused and reviewed a series of recent social interactions, noting small patterns and anomalies, a delayed response, an unusual photograph, an offhand comment in a status update. He catalogued these mentally, assigning weight to each and predicting the likely sequence of events that would unfold at the gathering. The reflective surfaces in the apartment, from the polished chrome handles to the crystal glassware, caught and refracted the morning light in shifting patterns, each reflection a subtle visual cue that he stored alongside auditory and olfactory inputs. Logan sipped coffee again, allowing the warmth to steady his senses as he mentally rehearsed possible scenarios, testing reactions and outcomes with calm precision. The shadows across the room shifted gradually as the sun rose higher, illuminating the soft texture of the sofa, the edges of the marble countertops, and the subtle grains of the hardwood floor, each detail contributing to a cinematic awareness of his environment. Something felt imminent. Logan picked up the envelope once more, turning it slowly in his hands, noting the weight, the texture, the minute imperfections, the subtle embossing in the paper, every element recorded for later interpretation. He traced the path from the envelope to the windows, to the black SUV below, to the patterns of sunlight on the surfaces, forming a mental map that connected environment, timing, and potential interactions into a cohesive framework of anticipation. The ambient sounds of the city continued, distant conversations, the hum of traffic, the occasional bell from a streetcar, yet within the apartment, every detail was magnified and catalogued, each one a building block of understanding. Logan Hayes allowed his gaze to linger on the smallest reflections, the faint sheen of a polished countertop, the glint from the crystal, the subtle shadows cast by morning light, all forming layers of data that he would integrate into his strategy. He set the coffee mug down, fingertips brushing the smooth marble as he absorbed the spatial relationships, the patterns of light, and the sensory cues, creating a quiet mental preparation for what was to unfold. Something felt wrong. Then, his eyes caught a minor detail on the sideboard, a slightly misplaced wine glass, a reflection that seemed off by a fraction of an inch, a subtle imperfection in the symmetry of the room. Logan catalogued it silently, recognizing it as a potential signal, a clue to the upcoming arrangement of people, space, and timing. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes turned his attention to the sequence of events he had carefully mapped out, moving through the apartment with the precision of someone executing a plan that had been building silently for days. He gathered the documents and devices he would need, reviewing notes on guest lists, seating arrangements, and timing, mentally rehearsing how each interaction could unfold. The morning sunlight continued to filter through the windows, illuminating the subtle textures of the marble countertops and polished hardwood floors, the glint of the crystal wine glasses on the sideboard catching the light in miniature bursts. Something felt wrong. He noted the small details that might have been overlooked by others, the exact positioning of the black SUV outside, the subtle reflections of sunlight on the polished chrome handles, the faint scent of vanilla lingering from the candle he had left burning, and the low hum of the city below carrying the rhythm of routine life. Logan picked up his tablet and began cross-referencing social updates, confirming the arrival times, potential interactions, and the layout of the space where the gathering would occur. Every notification, every timestamp, every subtle phrasing became a point of data, stored and categorized meticulously. He allowed himself a slow, deep breath, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face and the solid weight of the leather chair beneath him, grounding himself while anticipating the orchestration of events. The polished marble surfaces reflected the light differently as the day progressed, subtle shifts highlighting edges and contours of the apartment, creating visual cues that Logan catalogued along with auditory and olfactory inputs. He moved to the kitchen, observing the delicate patterns of light and shadow on the countertops, the faint shimmer of sunlight across the glass of a wine decanter, the faint aroma of coffee mixing with vanilla, a sensory map forming around him. Something felt imminent. He traced his fingers along the smooth surface of the marble, feeling the coolness and solidity, mentally linking each sensation to the sequence he had constructed for the gathering. Logan reviewed the notes once more, parsing the tone, the subtleties, and the intention behind each carefully chosen word, noting how they intersected with prior patterns, timing, and social cues. The city noises drifted through the open window, the distant murmur of conversations, the low hum of traffic, the occasional chime of a streetcar bell, each sound folded into the broader map of observation and anticipation Logan was constructing. He returned to the living area, glancing at the black SUV parked below, noting the angle, the shine of the windows, the subtle positioning that suggested timing and movement, cataloging every detail in preparation. The crystal wine glasses reflected sunlight like miniature spotlights, the polished chrome and marble surfaces refracting light and adding depth to the visual landscape he was internalizing. Logan adjusted the blinds slightly, watching the subtle changes in light, shadow, and reflection, reinforcing his awareness of spatial dynamics and environmental cues. His mind ran through scenarios, contingency plans, potential reactions from guests, and the calculated timing of his own movements, each layered with precision and attention to sensory detail. Something felt wrong. He allowed himself to absorb the complete environment, the interplay of light, scent, sound, and reflection, the subtle orchestration of luxury cues alongside ordinary elements, each contributing to a cinematic tableau of anticipation. Logan Hayes then focused on his own preparation, considering attire, posture, and presence, each detail fine-tuned to communicate calm confidence and strategic advantage without overt declaration. The subtle shifts in sunlight, the reflections on glass and chrome, the faint hum of the city, and the lingering aroma of coffee and vanilla all combined to create a sensory awareness heightened for precise observation. He took a slow, measured breath, cataloging the final details, letting the environment, the timing, and the sensory input form a complete map of the impending scenario. Then he picked up the envelope once more, turning it slowly in his hands, noting every crease, every indentation, every subtle marking, preparing to integrate it seamlessly into the plan he had so meticulously built. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes moved to the window, the cool glass under his palm a stark contrast to the warmth of the morning sun spilling across the polished hardwood floors and the gleaming marble countertops. He observed the city below, the streets alive with the soft rhythm of daily life, pedestrians moving in measured cadence, the faint rumble of cars, the distant ringing of a cable car bell. Something felt wrong. He turned his attention back to the apartment, cataloging every object, every subtle shift in light and shadow. The crystal wine glasses on the sideboard caught the sunlight, scattering tiny reflections across the room, each one an anchor point in the cinematic space he mentally mapped. Logan picked up his tablet and began reviewing the final list of guests, cross-referencing names with social media updates and previous interactions, noting subtle hints of expectation, alliance, and hidden intentions. The black SUV outside remained in view, its polished surface reflecting the sunlight like a quiet sentinel, waiting for the precise moment of action. He moved through the apartment deliberately, touching the smooth marble, the polished chrome, the soft leather of his chair, noting every sensory input, the faint aroma of coffee and vanilla, the soft hum of the ventilation system, the gentle creak of the floorboards underfoot. Logan cataloged each sensory detail, integrating it into a comprehensive mental map of the space, timing, and environmental cues. Something felt imminent. He rehearsed the flow of the gathering in his mind, each step, each glance, each potential interaction, predicting reactions and noting deviations, mapping a precise sequence of expected and unexpected events. The sunlight shifted gradually, casting changing reflections on surfaces, highlighting the polished edge of a crystal decanter, the subtle grain of the hardwood, the sleek lines of the stainless steel appliances. Logan noted the subtle positioning of objects, a wine glass slightly off-center, a reflection in the polished chrome, a faint shadow that suggested movement in the apartment's periphery. Each detail became part of a larger pattern, a lattice of observation and anticipation that he could read, adjust, and respond to with perfect timing. He moved back to the living area, sitting in his leather armchair, fingertips grazing the smooth marble of the side table, absorbing the quiet energy of the apartment while his mind calculated the flow of information and movement. Something felt wrong. He allowed his senses to catalog the changing light, the faint scent of vanilla, the hum of the city below, the reflections on polished surfaces, all forming a multidimensional awareness of his environment. Logan reviewed his tablet once more, noting timestamps, subtle cues in messages, the slight deviations in expected behavior, storing each as a data point for analysis. The polished crystal reflected a beam of sunlight onto the wall, highlighting subtle shifts in the room, shadows stretching and contracting in rhythm with the moving sun. He considered attire, posture, presence, and subtle gestures, ensuring that each would communicate calm confidence without overt declaration, blending seamlessly into the environment while signaling control. Something felt imminent. The soft clink of glass, the faint aroma of coffee, the gentle movement of the curtains, the hum of the city, the reflections and shadows, all combined to create a layered tableau of anticipation and precision. Logan Hayes leaned back, eyes sweeping the apartment, the SUV outside, the shifting sunlight, the subtle reflections, the ambient sounds, cataloging, integrating, preparing, a master of observation in a cinematic space that was alive, waiting, and ready. He picked up the envelope one final time, noting its weight, texture, slight imperfections, and subtle embossing, each detail contributing to the full mental map he had constructed. He had no idea what was coming. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes glanced at the clock, noting the approach of mid-afternoon and the subtle shift of sunlight across the polished marble floors and gleaming stainless steel appliances. He adjusted his posture in the leather armchair, fingertips brushing the smooth surface of the side table as he mentally rehearsed the sequence of events that would soon unfold. The city outside hummed quietly, distant conversations, the low rumble of cars, and the occasional chime of a streetcar bell blending into a rhythm he had internalized. Something felt wrong. He rose and moved to the window, observing the black SUV below, the vehicle catching the sunlight and reflecting it in small, sharp glints, a silent signal of readiness. Logan returned to the living area, scanning the crystal wine glasses lined up on the sideboard, the polished chrome handles on the cabinets, the subtle sheen of the hardwood floor, cataloging each reflection and shadow as part of the mental map he had constructed. He reviewed his tablet, cross-referencing names, arrival times, and subtle social cues, noting slight anomalies, hints of expectation, and the potential alignment of events that might play out during the gathering. The soft aroma of coffee and vanilla lingered in the air, grounding his senses while he allowed the details to sharpen into a coherent mental plan. Something felt imminent. He moved to the marble countertop, turning the envelope slowly in his hands, noting every crease, smudge, and embossed detail, committing each to memory for strategic use. The sunlight shifted gradually, casting long reflections across the floors and surfaces, highlighting edges and contours, creating subtle cues in the play of light that Logan catalogued meticulously. He considered attire, posture, gestures, and the subtle interplay of body language that would convey calm confidence, ensuring that every movement would be precise, deliberate, and observed without revealing the depth of his awareness. Logan allowed himself a slow, deep breath, feeling the warmth of sunlight on his face and the solidity of the leather chair beneath him, integrating sensory inputs, the faint hum of the city, the shifting shadows, the reflections on polished surfaces, and the lingering aromas, all forming a cinematic tableau of anticipation. Something felt wrong. He rehearsed potential interactions in his mind, predicting reactions, noting subtle deviations, and adjusting his mental map with each consideration. The crystal wine glasses caught another glint of sunlight, the polished chrome reflected subtle streaks of light, the hardwood floor gave off a muted sheen, and Logan noted the minor imperfection in the alignment of the furnishings, a detail that might signal a shift in behavior or focus from those he observed. He moved to the window again, surveying the streets, observing pedestrian flow, subtle traffic patterns, and the distant sounds of the city, all integrated into his growing mental preparation. Every reflection, shadow, scent, and sound became part of a detailed map of awareness that he could reference instantaneously. Logan Hayes sat back in the leather armchair, fingertips tracing the smooth marble once more, absorbing the environment, noting shifts in light and shadow, the subtle movement of curtains, the glint of sunlight on the black SUV below, the gentle hum of the city, and the reflections from the crystal glasses, integrating it all into a cohesive strategy. Something felt imminent. He allowed himself one final scan of the apartment, cataloging every detail, sensory input, and environmental cue, forming a complete tableau of observation and anticipation. Then he took a slow, deliberate breath, eyes narrowing slightly, absorbing the full scope of the environment and the moment, fully aware that everything was poised to change. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes felt a subtle shift in the atmosphere as the afternoon deepened, the sunlight now angled more sharply through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting elongated shadows across the polished marble and hardwood surfaces. He moved deliberately toward the front of the apartment, checking each reflection on the glass surfaces, the crystal wine glasses, and the polished chrome handles of the cabinets, absorbing the interplay of light and shadow like a map of anticipation. Something felt wrong. The black SUV below caught a bright glint of sunlight, its tinted windows reflecting the urban landscape in fragments, a quiet reminder of readiness outside. Logan returned to the living area and scanned the room, the subtle arrangement of furniture, the faint scent of coffee lingering from earlier, the vanilla from the candle mixing with it, the gentle hum of the city below, all forming layers of sensory data in his mind. He opened his tablet, reviewing the latest social updates and notes about the event, each subtle phrase, each timestamp becoming a point of analysis, an indicator of timing, mood, and potential interactions. Logan adjusted the blinds slightly, letting the angle of sunlight highlight the polished surfaces, the reflections on the crystal, and the subtle shimmer on the hardwood, cataloging each nuance for strategic reference. Something felt imminent. He moved carefully around the apartment, touching surfaces, noting reflections, and the ambient soundscape, from distant car engines to faint pedestrian footsteps, integrating every sensory input into a detailed mental map. He rehearsed potential arrivals, each guest interaction, subtle movements and gestures that might reveal intentions, cataloging expected deviations and unexpected anomalies. The polished marble, the crystal glassware, the subtle sheen of hardwood, the glinting chrome, and the lingering scent of coffee and vanilla all merged into a cinematic tableau, creating a heightened awareness of space and timing. Logan considered posture, subtle gestures, and attire, ensuring that each element would communicate control and calm confidence without revealing the depth of his preparation. Something felt wrong. He returned to the envelope, turning it slowly in his hands, noting the texture, slight imperfections, and embossed details, integrating it seamlessly into the ongoing plan he had built in his mind. He allowed himself a deep, steady breath, taking in the environment, the reflections, the shadows, the ambient sounds, and the subtle cues in the room that could signal shifts in behavior or focus from those expected to attend the gathering. The city noises outside continued in a low, constant rhythm, blending with the interior sounds to create a multilayered sensory backdrop that Logan absorbed completely. Something felt imminent. He moved to the window again, observing the streets below, the pattern of pedestrian movement, the soft flow of traffic, the distant bell of a cable car, and the way light shifted across vehicles and pavement, cataloging each detail and integrating it into his mental framework. The crystal glass on the sideboard caught another glint of sunlight, highlighting the subtle shifts in light and shadow across the room. Logan Hayes leaned back slightly, fingertips tracing the smooth marble, observing the ambient environment, integrating sensory data, and anticipating reactions with precise mental mapping. Every reflection, shadow, scent, and sound contributed to a comprehensive tableau of awareness, heightened focus, and cinematic anticipation. Then he closed his eyes briefly, centering himself, absorbing the stillness, the calm, and the layered details of the space. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes adjusted his posture in the leather armchair, letting the afternoon light sweep across the polished hardwood floors and glint off the marble countertops, the crystal wine glasses casting miniature prisms of light onto the surfaces below. He reviewed the final layout of the apartment in his mind, visualizing the placement of guests, the flow of movement, and the subtle nuances that might reveal intention or opportunity. The soft hum of the city outside blended with distant conversations and the faint bell of a streetcar, each sound catalogued as part of a multilayered sensory map. Something felt wrong. He moved deliberately to the kitchen island, fingertips brushing the smooth marble, noting the angle of sunlight on the countertops, the reflections in the polished chrome handles, and the subtle shadows shifting across the floorboards. Logan retrieved the envelope once more, turning it carefully, observing every crease, every embossing detail, every subtle mark as if they held encoded information about the sequence of events to come. He glanced toward the black SUV parked below, sunlight reflecting off its tinted windows, the vehicle a silent participant in the orchestration he was preparing for. Then he returned to the living area, scanning the room meticulously, the alignment of the crystal glasses, the sheen of the hardwood, the slight imperfections in the furniture arrangement, the lingering aroma of coffee and vanilla, all forming a layered tableau of observation. Logan cataloged these sensory inputs alongside social updates, timestamps, and previous interactions, creating a mental dossier that allowed him to anticipate reactions and deviations with precision. The sunlight shifted again, casting longer shadows, highlighting subtle details in the space, the glint off the crystal decanter, the soft reflection on the chrome, the angled beams across the marble. Something felt imminent. He allowed his mind to play through multiple scenarios, rehearsing movements, gestures, and the timing of steps that would convey calm confidence while preserving the hidden depth of his awareness. Logan adjusted the blinds slightly, watching the shifting patterns of light and shadow, integrating each into his mental map of the apartment and the anticipated gathering. The ambient hum of the city, the faint footsteps on distant sidewalks, the subtle variations in light across polished surfaces, all coalesced into a sensory map he could navigate effortlessly. He picked up the tablet and scanned through messages again, observing subtle phrasing, hidden cues, and deviations from expected behavior, noting which ones might foreshadow reactions and align with his strategic sequence. The crystal wine glasses glinted as the sunlight shifted, reflecting light onto the marble in patterns that he catalogued, the hardwood floors giving off a soft sheen that emphasized texture and depth. Logan considered posture, subtle gestures, attire, and presence, ensuring each element communicated deliberate confidence without revealing the totality of his preparation. Something felt wrong. He breathed slowly, absorbing the scents, sounds, reflections, and shadows, allowing the full tableau of environmental and social cues to anchor his awareness. The soft rustle of the curtains in the breeze, the shifting light, the glint on chrome and crystal, the low hum of the city, all combined into a layered narrative of anticipation, strategy, and precision. Logan Hayes leaned back slightly, fingertips brushing marble, eyes sweeping the apartment, the black SUV below, the changing sunlight, the reflections from crystal and chrome, integrating every detail into his mental dossier and confirming the readiness of his plan. Then he exhaled deliberately, eyes narrowing as he absorbed the full scope of the moment, fully prepared for the convergence of timing, space, and observation that was about to unfold. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes paused at the edge of the living room, the sunlight now deepening into a rich, golden hue, casting long, dramatic shadows across the polished hardwood and marble surfaces. He observed the room with a quiet intensity, noting every glint of crystal on the sideboard, the soft reflections of light on the chrome handles, and the subtle sheen of the hardwood floors that seemed to shift as the sun moved. Something felt wrong. The black SUV outside glinted intermittently, the sunlight catching its tinted windows, a silent indicator of timing and anticipation. Logan moved slowly, deliberately, across the space, fingertips grazing the smooth marble of the kitchen island, absorbing every sensory cue, the faint scent of vanilla from the candle, the lingering aroma of coffee, the soft hum of the ventilation system, the distant rhythm of the city below. Each detail was catalogued and integrated into his mental map, a precise record of environment and potential interaction. He opened his tablet and reviewed the latest updates, parsing through subtle phrasing, minor deviations in expected behavior, and small hints of intention that might signal a shift in the gathering. The crystal wine glasses reflected the light like miniature prisms, casting small, shifting patterns onto the marble and hardwood, which Logan noted, integrating visual cues into the broader tableau of observation. He adjusted the blinds slightly, allowing the angled sunlight to highlight the polished surfaces and glint off the chrome and glass, each subtle reflection catalogued in real time. Something felt imminent. Logan rehearsed movements, gestures, and presence in his mind, ensuring that his posture, attire, and every subtle shift in expression would communicate calm confidence while concealing the full depth of his awareness. The faint rustle of the curtains in the breeze, the glint of sunlight on polished surfaces, the gentle hum of the city below, and the lingering aromas combined into a layered sensory map that Logan absorbed completely. He leaned back, fingertips brushing marble, observing the full interplay of light, shadow, reflections, and sensory input, each element reinforcing his preparation. Something felt wrong. The apartment seemed to hold its breath, the shifting sunlight, the subtle reflections, the ambient hum, the faint movement of air all combining to create a heightened cinematic tension. Logan reviewed every detail again, the black SUV, the pattern of light on the crystal, the angles of shadows on the hardwood, the slight misalignment of objects, the timing of anticipated arrivals, the subtle signals in communications. Everything was catalogued, assessed, and integrated. He exhaled slowly, allowing a brief moment of stillness to anchor himself before action. The sunlight softened into late afternoon, elongating the shadows, highlighting textures, and casting subtle glimmers across the room. Logan Hayes observed it all, eyes sweeping from marble to chrome to crystal, from the city streets below to the black SUV, from the ambient soundscape to subtle visual cues, integrating each into a single, comprehensive awareness. He shifted slightly, noting a minor detail in the arrangement of the room that could signal a behavioral change in the guests, cataloging it without disturbance to his calm. The crystal wine glasses, the polished hardwood, the reflective chrome, the faint aromas, the distant city sounds, all coalesced into a cinematic tableau of anticipation and precise observation. Logan allowed himself a slow, controlled breath, fingertips tracing the smooth marble as he absorbed the final sensory and visual details, confirming readiness, ensuring control, and reinforcing his mental map. Something felt imminent. Then he glanced once more toward the envelope on the marble island, noting every crease and subtle imperfection, integrating it fully into the plan he had meticulously constructed. Everything changed after that moment. Logan Hayes stepped back from the window, the late afternoon sunlight now casting a warm amber glow across the polished hardwood floors and the gleaming marble countertops. He allowed his senses to absorb the apartment one final time, the subtle glint of sunlight on crystal wine glasses, the soft sheen of polished chrome handles, the faint aroma of vanilla and coffee lingering in the air, the gentle hum of the city below, and the precise alignment of furnishings creating a cinematic frame of observation. Something felt imminent. He moved slowly toward the front door, fingers brushing the smooth marble, taking in every detail, from the reflection of the black SUV parked below to the shifting shadows across the hardwood. Logan reviewed the mental map he had built over the hours, the sequence of guest arrivals, the placement of subtle cues, the interplay of light and reflection, the ambient sounds that could influence perception, and the precise timing required to maintain composure while executing the unfolding plan. Each element of the apartment, from the crystal reflections to the polished wood, had been catalogued and integrated into a sensory framework that allowed him to anticipate the smallest deviations. He paused, feeling the weight of the moment, the culmination of careful observation, preparation, and strategy. The air held a quiet tension, the kind that stretches time while every sound, light shift, and movement becomes magnified in significance. Something felt wrong. Logan took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the warmth of sunlight on his skin, the solidity of the leather chair behind him, and the smooth marble beneath his fingertips, grounding himself fully as he prepared to move from anticipation to action. He glanced at the envelope once more, noting every crease, every embossed detail, the subtle imperfections, all catalogued in his mind as part of the comprehensive plan he had meticulously constructed. The black SUV below caught another glint of sunlight, a silent signal of readiness and timing. Logan began to move toward the elevator, each step deliberate, measured, and controlled, visualizing the sequence of events unfolding precisely as he had anticipated, rehearsing gestures, posture, and presence to convey calm confidence without revealing the full scope of awareness and preparation. The city outside hummed in the late afternoon, a low, steady pulse that merged with the ambient sounds inside the apartment, the faint rustle of curtains, the glinting reflections on crystal and chrome, the subtle shadows cast by the shifting sunlight. Each element was integrated into Logan's mental map, forming a complete sensory tableau that allowed him to operate with perfect awareness and composure. Something felt imminent. As he reached the elevator and pressed the call button, the polished metal reflected his composed expression, the faint aroma of coffee and vanilla grounding his senses, the glint of the crystal in the living area catching in his peripheral vision. Logan Hayes exhaled slowly, letting the preparation and observation coalesce into confidence, the cinematic awareness of space, light, sound, and reflection now fully aligned. The apartment, the reflections, the sounds, the scents, the shifting sunlight, the black SUV outside, the subtle positioning of objects, all formed a tableau of readiness. Everything changed after that moment.